What's up, everyone? This is the Manuscript Podcast, the podcast where we believe 21st century man controls his destiny, that his choices define his future, and that he writes the script to his own life. I'm your host and fellow man, Reuben Stamper, and as always, it is an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. If you get something out of this episode, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel or the Spotify, whichever is most convenient to you. All right, let's get right into things. Today, we are talking all about tact. Now, tact is one of many social virtues that Aristotle, who is like the god-tier authority on virtue, one of the social virtues that he talks about. Now, I'm just going to focus on tact because I think it is the easiest one to go over, and I think it carries the most weight as far as, how we as men can use it today. So, if you've been watching the past few episodes, we've got a bit of a format here at this point. We talk about, first off, what the virtue is, second off, why you should want it, and then third off, how you get it. It's kind of hard to talk about a virtue at all if you don't know what it is. So let's get right into things. Tact is the virtue which allows you to basically be a badass partygoer, regardless of your personality. And to put it in more specific terms, tact is the virtue which deals with giving amusement and the proper way to do it. So it deals with both receiving and giving amusement, actually, but the proper way to do that in a social setting. A lot of the virtues we've talked about have been in, very extreme circumstances. You've got to use them, like courage, whether you're in war, you've got to make decisions and things can get crazy real fast. Or, I've talked about the scenario where a guy fuels up your wife in a bar and it's like, oh man, you've got to use a virtue there. Or like temperance when it comes to achieving big goals of yours or small goals. But this is one of the virtues that deals with an area of your life where you're relaxed. You're like at a party, you're having a good time with a bunch of people, and if you act in accord with this virtue, it's going to make you an amazing party goer or host for a multitude of reasons we're about to get into. But that's what tact is. It's the virtue which deals with giving the proper amount of amusement and receiving the proper amount of amusement, and being able to kind of go with the flow of a party or a social setting, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a party. It could be after a dodgeball game, whatever it is, hanging out with your buddies, being able to give and receive the proper amount of amusement. That's the simplest definition I could give you. So why should you want the virtue of tact? Well, in short, it makes you better at socializing with others, men and women, and most importantly, it makes you better at socializing with them in a meaningful way. And there's a huge lack of this in today's world, right? I'm trying to think. Guys hang out at maybe the gym, the bar, frat parties. Like, that's what comes to mind when you think of, okay, where are guys actually hanging out with other people? And those places, I'm not saying that you can't have great times at all those places, but, I think there is a big a lack of community. I've talked about that before. And a lot of it is because people aren't freaking good at having fun with, This virtue is supposed to make you, like, if you act in accord with it, it should make you into a more fun and enjoyable person to be around. And that's something I think as men, we should all strive for. So we're going to dive deeper into that. But this whole idea of socializing better with everybody around you in a meaningful way, it's good for your soul. It's good for building self-esteem. It's good for making great connections with people. And so it's a very valuable virtue to actually try and adhere to. So, okay, before we start talking about how you get it, I want to go over the three men that Aristotle talks about in regard to this virtue. Now, if you've watched past episodes, this three-man format that he gives you is super helpful when it comes to telling you where you're at, in regard to the virtue. I guess one of the best ways I can explain this is, let's say you have a target weight you want to hit for some reason, which I don't think that's necessarily how you should do fitness, but that is my own. I digress. I'm not going to talk about that. But when it comes to, like, say you have a specific weight you wish to hit. So you're like, man, I really want to get to 195, okay? So you step on the scale, and you look down, and the scale comes back, and it says, you're 208. You're like, you look at that, and you're like, damn. Okay, I gotta change some stuff up. If I'm wanting to hit 195, I gotta drop a couple pounds, and I'm gonna have to make some choices that get me there. And so, Or maybe, you're trying to bulk up and you're trying to hit 180 and you're a 160-pound guy and whatever. You get on the scale and it's reading like 168 and you're like, damn it, okay, I got to eat more. It tells you where you're at. The scale just tells you where are you currently so that in relation to your goal. So if your goal is 180 as a 160-pound guy, well, okay, you know what you need to do. If your goal is 195 as a 208-pound guy, well, you know what you got to do. Okay, it gives you a reference point. And that's what this three-man method that Aristotle goes over with each virtue gives you. It's like, okay, where am I? Where do I need to adjust? How do I actually hit this idea of being a tactful man or a virtue, a courageous man or a temperate man? It helps with all those things. So I'm going to go over the three men that Aristotle talks about in regards to tact. And I hope that it helps you see where you're at, and I'm once again, I try and make this very clear in this podcast. I am not perfect at any of these virtues, but I'm working at becoming better. And I hope that if you're watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, that you're of the same mind. You want to become better. So, okay, here are the three men that Aristotle talks about in regard to the virtue of tact. The first is the buffoon. Not a baboon, by the way. A buffoon, okay? And that's like, you've probably heard of the word buffoon, but it's like kind of a crazy idiot, that's out there doing stupid stuff. And the buffoon tries to give too much amusement. He does super outlandish things to get people's attention and like to get a rise out of people. And the weird thing is it often works. People do normally like laugh at the crazy shit that he does. But a lot of times, in my experience, they're laughing from a sense of pity, right? It's like this guy puts so much of himself out there on the line that if I don't laugh, I'm going to be seen as a douchebag. So I'm going to laugh. But it's not laughing so much because what he's doing is crazy funny or enjoyable. It's, man, you really risked a lot there. Like, why did you go that hard in that department? You could probably scale it back a little bit. So the buffoon does crazy stuff to get a rise out of people and to give that amusement to people. He wants to be accepted by everyone, but the problem is it leads you to be seen as an extreme dude, and you don't really want that at a party. Like you're the guy that's going to jump on the chandelier or smash a table. It's like, dude, like chill. We don't need that. That's a little too far just so you can get a laugh out of people. Another great example is if you've ever watched the Jackass series. Like there's definitely some funny stuff in those movies, but all those guys in that series, I don't respect them. And why? It's because they went so far to get a rise out of people that they actually ended up hurting their own integrity, in my eyes, and I think in a lot of other people's eyes. Like I don't really respect them. I think they've done some crazy stuff that is just too wild to not be like, wow, that is insane. But at the same time, I think that the buffoon draws respect away from himself, and I don't think any man really wants that. And another thing about the buffoon is that he will get mad if other people are garnering attention, right? So somebody makes a joke and it just kills. Like, it's hilarious, right? Everybody's like laughing at it. He might laugh along, but in the back of his mind, he's thinking, he's got this like jealous mentality, like, why are they laughing at his joke and not mine, So that's the buffoon. You don't want to be the buffoon. Yeah, so that's what the buffoon is. Steer clear of that. Now, let's talk about the other extreme when it comes to this virtue of tact, and that's the boorish man. So the boorish man, how's the best way to describe this? He's basically Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, like just always sullen and sad and a pessimist, and he brings down the mood of the party so hard. It's terrible. He's like that guy in the corner with his arms crossed, looking at the floor, mumbling about how he didn't get his way. What's a good example? Okay, let's say you went to your friend's house, and it's a small group gathering of a couple of your friends, and you guys knew it was a game night. Like you guys had already talked about, this is a game night. Hey, come over, eat dinner at our house. We're going to have a game night. And the boorish man comes into it thinking, oh, Monopoly. For sure, we are playing Monopoly. And he suggests it, and everyone's like, hey, great game, but it takes 3.5 hours. Let's play something, let's play Clue, because that's like something, everybody can stay engaged in. It's fun. People a lot of times aren't as much of a dick during that game. Like, man, Monopoly, I'm cutthroat. Same thing with Risk. Like, I can be a jackass for sure when we're playing those games, but that's why I really choose to play those with my guy buddies who can take it, because I don't want to really offend people in that regard. You know, I'm ranting about board games now. I got to get off that train. But, you know, the boorish man is like pissed the entire time. And so even if he does play Clue with the people, he, at the back of his mind and with his actions and his body language, he's going to be telling everyone there, I'm really upset you didn't choose the game that I wanted to play. That's the boorish man. And he's just a douchebag. Like, don't be that guy. You know, I'm sure everybody has experienced that person where they don't get their way, so they get so mad and they just bring down the whole mood of the party and they make it all about them. It's a very selfish position to have, and nobody likes that in a man, okay? So that's why you should steer clear of being the boorish man. And then finally, let's talk about the tactful man. So first and foremost, the tactful man is like when you're thinking of your guest list, it's like, damn, you know, probably the first 4 people that you list for your guest list are probably relatively tactful people, because they just elevate the whole mood of a party and they make it super fun. And that's because they know the proper amount of amusement to give and the proper amount of amusement to receive. And there's a great back and forth that they can bring to a party. They almost bring like simultaneously a lightness to the party, like a relaxed nature to the party, but also this sense that, oh, you know, there's also depth here. We're not just drinking beer to drink beer. Like, I can drink beer with this person and have a great conversation and really feel fulfilled and get this great sense of catharsis from them. And we could talk about deep subjects. We could talk about light subjects. We could, you know, just all across the board. They're great to have at a party because they make others laugh, but they don't talk over other people. You know, they've got this very beneficial attitude towards everyone. They just want everybody to have a great time, and they're able to go with the flow. So he may have been the guy that came to the party and was like, okay, I thought we could play Monopoly, but no worries, let's play Clue. And he makes that mental choice to say, yeah, I'm going to choose to have a good time here, because I could choose to sulk in my corner and cry like a little baby, but I'm not going to. I'm going to, for the sake of everyone else at the party, I'm going to try and have a good time, because that's what I'm here for. I got invited here by the host. I'm supposed to be a good guest. And so the tactful man, he's just all around amazing to have at a party. And so, yeah, try and be the tactful man. I mean, I'm definitely not perfect at this, but it's really worth striving for, being this guy that everybody can talk to and relate to. And that doesn't mean, everyone's got different personalities. Don't get me wrong. Some people are quieter than others. Some people are loud and boisterous. And that's not a bad thing. That may just be your personality. But learn how to work with your personality so that you can, when the time comes, you know, bring out a little bit of that. Just like, hey, I'm here to have a good time. Like, there are people at parties that I've gone to, you know, where they're quiet, but you can also tell they're having a good time and they just elevate the mood, you know? Like, maybe they're not the most talkative person, but you can still have a great conversation with them if you choose to engage in it. You know, some people at parties like will actively seek out a conversation. Other people don't. Sometimes you have to go to them, and then you end up having a great conversation. And so this idea of like, oh, well, my personality is going to get in the way of me being a tactful man. No, that's not true. That's not true. You get to make choices. That's the whole point of this podcast, people. You get to make choices that can make you into a better party guest or a better socializer. Or you can make choices that will lead you away from that. So make choices to be the tactful man and be great in those social circumstances. So we have talked about what tact is. We have talked about why you should want it. We've talked about the 3 men that Aristotle talks about in regard to tact. Now let's talk about how you get it. So, like every other virtue that I've talked about, it requires repetition. It's not going to happen overnight. Most change in a man's life doesn't happen overnight. Okay, it's so rare. You know, like, people don't have Facebook success stories all the time. It's a slow progression. And so, like every other virtue, it requires repetition. Doing good time and time again, so that one day it becomes second nature and natural. But how do you do it? You pause before you act. This is really the key, in my opinion, to actually becoming tactful. Take a pause before you do something in a social setting, right? So it's like maybe you've got a sex joke you want to make, right? Because you think it's really funny and your guy buddies would really appreciate it. But before you make that joke in a social setting, you definitely check the room and you make sure, okay, this joke would be super inappropriate if there were ladies around. I'm not going to make this joke. It would make, I would be seen as a lesser person if I were to do that. So I'm not going to do that. Okay. I'm going to wait for the proper opportune moment for that. It may be taking a pause before your first reaction to that whole game scenario. It's like, okay, Monopoly didn't get chosen. I was kind of looking forward to playing that tonight, but okay, how should I react? And then you think about how you should react, and then you react the right way. A lot of times, let's be honest, guys. I mean, I know this for myself. A lot of times, my first reaction is not the best reaction. It's just the reaction, So, having that pause, taking that time can be super helpful when it comes to making decisions in a social setting that will contribute to the happiness of everyone around and the joy of everyone around, the lightness of the atmosphere, the fun nature of the party. So take a second to pause. I was actually at one of my cousin's bachelor parties recently. It was a great time, and they got all the married men around, and they sat him down, and they were giving advice. And one of the guys there, he gave a piece of advice I'll share with you because I thought it was great. He was like, in the years that I've been married to my wife, one of the things I've really become a pro at is the power of huh. And I was like, power of huh? What the hell is this guy talking about? And he's like, when my wife comes to me with something and she's angry or she's upset, before I react, I go, huh. And I give myself that half second to think. And I was like, man, that's so great. It's like in anything in life, when there's a big decision that needs to be made relatively fast, how are you going to react? Just go, huh, and maybe you don't do it audibly, but you just take a half second pause before your first reaction. Because, anybody that you love that at different times has offended you, sometimes they come to you with something and they're all heated and everything. And your first reaction could be, oh, I'm going to get heated back. I'm going to get really pissed off real fast too, because I'm defensive and like they're attacking me. But a lot of times that's not the best reaction. A lot of times the best reaction is to go, take that little power of huh, like the guy said. I love that. And he goes, huh. And in your head, you're thinking, how should I react to this? Take a little deep breath and then react. And so it's the same thing in a social setting. Is like your first reaction might not always be the best. So just give yourself a half second. Don't be like standing there staring off into space for, 10 seconds and not responding to things. But just be proactive about thinking, what is the next right move in this circumstance. And that really applies to every virtue, but I think with tact, just questioning real fast, like, oh, if I make this joke, is it going to go over in a really bad way? Should I not make this joke because it might be taken the wrong way? And sometimes you take that risk, sometimes you don't, but the tactful man is thinking about these things and being proactive. No one's perfect at a party. I mean, certainly not. But you can work at becoming the tactful man and thinking about things before you do them. So that is the virtue of tact. Like I said, I got to work on this too. But I hope this helped you all to kind of, maybe see some options as to how you should act in social settings. And it makes you have a badass time, next time you go to a party. I think we are missing so much fun today, like meaningful fun. We do stuff that we say is fun, but it never creates lasting memories. It never creates this sense of peace at the end of things. Like a great party, if you've ever gone to a great party and you leave and, you're on your drive home and you kind of take this big exhale and you're like, man, that was a really solid time. I had so many great conversations with people and I learned so many new things about people, interesting things. And, it's also like a valuable part of this too, where a lot of times if you're able to be the tactful man, people want to be around you and you can make amazing connections. Like, oh, I need a plumber. I just learned that John's a plumber. So, maybe if we meet a couple more times, we get to know each other better, I could ask him for a favor and I could return a favor, in return. And so there's a connection aspect to this that's valuable as well. But yeah, that's tact. I hope you enjoyed. Let's move on to the second part of the manuscript podcast, which is the stats section, where we're talking about something going on right now today. Hey everyone, if you haven't already, please go check out my book, Modern Misery, How 21st Century Man Can Conquer His Iniquities and Release the Badass Gentleman Within. It's all about how 21st century man can overcome the many hurdles that are thrown at him today so that he can unlock the happiest man he can possibly be. If you're interested, please go check it out. I'd appreciate it. All right, back to the podcast. All right, everyone, we're going to be talking about a Debbie Downer stat in today's second part of the Manuscript podcast. Here we go. A broad study is taken every year on social media use, and according to ExplodingTopics.com's Josh Haworth, the average person is on social media for 2 hours and 14 minutes a day. Now let's break down some more numbers. Are you ready? The average person is awake for 17-ish hours a day. Obviously, everyone is different, but roughly 17 hours a day. So that means that they are spending roughly 13% of their day on social media. But wait, there's more, unfortunately. So also, Americans spend approximately 3 hours and 20 minutes watching broadcast TV and streaming, Netflix and HBO Max and all these things every day. So add those two things together, the 2 hours and 14 minutes on average and the 3 hours and 20 minutes on average for TV and streaming. And that means that Americans spend 5 hours and 34 minutes consuming media per day. And we've got roughly 17 hours that are waking hours and we're not asleep. To make it clearer, that is 33% of their waking hours consuming media. Now, call me a Luddite, call me an anti-technology person, call me a Scrooge, or some crazy guy from the 1800s who's like a Puritan when it comes to technology. But that's not good. I mean, 5 hours and 34 minutes a day consuming media, that's not even work stuff. It's just like consuming media. That's not hours on screens. That is literally on social media and streaming services. That's the average American. Now, once again, I know that is the average American. I am not like that. I don't spend that much time on those things. And I'm not trying to say it as like a holier than thou thing. It's just that's how I live my life. So I understand that the average person watching this video is probably saying, well, you're just an idiot, whatever. Fine. You can say that. I don't care. But these are the facts. Don't kill the messenger, man. I'm just telling you. The average American spends 5 hours and 34 minutes consuming media per day. So how does this affect men? Because this is a podcast about men's issues in the 21st century, how to overcome them. Well, I think an inherent part of being a man is that we actually do have this inherent desire to create. And if we're constantly consuming, that means we are not taking that time to create. And I'm not anti-television. I'm not anti-social media. Well, kind of a little bit for social media, but like for streaming and TV and movies, man, I love a lot of those things. Okay, like Stranger Things, great series, loved it. Probably spent too much time watching it, but I love The Office. There's a bunch of great shows that I love, bunch of great movies that I really enjoy. But spending this amount of time out of every day, I cannot imagine contributes to you being a happier man overall. I could be wrong. Maybe this is what you like to do with your time. I would argue that from a fundamental level, I probably have the logic to back up this argument and say, well, you aren't going to look back at your day and feel productive if you spent 5 hours and 34 minutes of it consuming media. And that's not even mentioning the time that like you take before you get into these things, right? So like relaxing, sitting down, taking a breath, stretching out, and then actually watching the thing. So it's like that's just a lot of time out of your day that you could be doing things. And I'm not a productivity monger where I'm out here saying, oh, you're wasting your day if you're not spending every minute doing something. No, I think there's definitely a place for relaxation, for watching a movie with people, for enjoying, that media, okay, and that, the audio and visual component of movies and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of that. There's a lot of movies that I think have really great manly messages in them that I think are super good for people. And there's just some beautiful, beautiful messages in a lot of different movies. And I'm not anti that. I'm just not. But these are the facts. So what are we going to do with them, man? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? There's a great book that I want to recommend if you're interested in any of this stuff. It's called Amusing Ourselves to Death. It's by Neil Postman. And it was written in the 1980s. So you may be thinking, how the hell is it relevant today? It's written, over 40 years ago. Well, the 1980s was right about when cable television became a staple. Like having a TV in your living room became a staple part of the American household. Now, I know it's crazy to think, but circa 50 years ago, there wasn't a massive TV in everyone's living room. I know, it's wild to think about, but like people must be wondering, what did you do? It's like, well, as a family, you'd sit in your living room, you'd live together, and you'd talk about life, and you would maybe do certain activities together. You'd play games and read books and stuff like that, And so in the 1980s, Neil Postman was looking at this situation, and he said, okay, this is definitely a change. That everyone has stopped facing each other in the living room, and they're all facing one direction, the TV, and they're just taking in what the TV is giving them. And he made some pretty crazy, I don't want to say I will, like prophetic stuff. Like he made these guesses in the 1980s, and they have become very much true today. So he argued that basically when mediums change, the medium through which information is transferred, when those things change, there's a shift in how much knowledge we take in and how much we actually learn. He said that not every medium is created equal when it comes to relaying information. For instance, he argued that books are a better way to learn than the TV. And I don't think many people would probably argue with that. And why is this? Why is it that books seem to help you remember things better and to learn more? It's because it asks something of you. TV doesn't ask anything of you. It asks you to sit there and watch. And you could be disengaged. You could let that fog go over your brain and your eyes where you're not doing really anything. You're not thinking about anything. You're just watching, dead staring at the TV, like not taking in any new information. Books ask you to be engaged. You don't just read a line in the book and be like, oh, I totally don't know what just happened there. No, as you're reading the line, you're like, what is this line, this sentence? What information is it conveying to me? And then you can put that in the context of the entire page, and then all of a sudden you've learned something in that page. You flip over and you've got another page, and that process of reading a book actually asks you to engage your brain, or else you're not just going to keep on flipping through a page of the book and not actually reading anything. That would be stupid. So, books are a different medium than television, right? It's a different medium than streaming, all these things. And so he made this argument that, yeah, okay, with this new entertainment box we've got in our living rooms, at the time it was a box. Nowadays they're amazing and super thin, TV screens. But it's like, what's really going to happen when we shift as a society from reading books for our information intake to watching audio video for our information intake? And his thing that I think was probably the most prophetic was he said, I'm going to read this because I thought it was so interesting. Yeah, he prophesied that the adoption of the television would inevitably lead to a less educated group of Americans. Fair enough. I feel like we all could probably get behind that statement. And that those people would have too much information to contend with. Now, I mean, I'm online a decent amount, so I'm definitely not free from all this. And I feel this in my own life, and I'd be interested if you've got comments you want to put down below, please do so. But there is this constant intake of information. I mean, social media particularly is kind of vile when it comes to this because it's throwing like short videos at you all the time, and there's not really time to mull over or think about the thing you just watched, the information you just gathered, because you're on to the next thing already. And I do feel like even with the news cycle, we've got a 24-hour news cycle. The news is not happening 24 hours a day. That's like a thing that we made up, okay? But this constant stream of information, this just new information after new information doesn't allow us to think about the information we were just given. So we forget stuff. We forget big stuff. I mean, there's some policymakers in my state that during COVID did a bunch of stuff that really pissed me off. And I really haven't forgotten because it's pissed me off so bad. But I think a lot of people did. A lot of people did. So it led to a certain outcome. But, you know, stuff like that is not good for a culture. Whereas with books, another thing about books that's interesting is you can get complex theories across in a book that you can't get in a television series or in a documentary. Like, it's not the same. You can get these super intricate, complex ideas across in a book, line after line, because what a book does. I wrote a book. Now it's been about a year ago, and it's now published. If you're interested in it, but while I was writing it, I recognized, man, my arguments are so fluffy, and I've got to really compact them down. And, if you're going to be a good writer, a big part of being a good writer is keeping things concise and coherent so that they make sense, but they're also not going to spread across an entire, page for a tiny little idea. I mean, this happened in college, too. If anybody's been in college, there were times where I would delay on writing a paper, and then I would just fill it with tons of fluff, and it's like, you just said the same thing 18 times in the same paragraph. What's going on there? But if you're going to actually write a book and you're trying to publish a book, you're going to make it good. You're going to make your ideas concise. And so that was like the benefit of the medium of a book, to say, oh, okay, I can really get deep ideas across through this medium because it's lines of my straight consciousness going onto that page. So things have changed. That's just the fact of the matter. This is how the world is right now. And so this idea, leading back to that stat, 5 hours and 34 minutes consuming media per day. Is it making you happier? Is it making you happier? If the answer is no, then stop doing it. There's a lot of simple solutions for things. I'm starting to find this as I'm growing older. There's a lot of simple solutions for things that are just difficult. They just really are, It's like, okay, you want to get in shape? I just need to eat less and I need to work out. Those are the two things I need to do. Or I need to eat better food and I need to work out. That's it. I mean, it's pretty damn simple. It's easy to say. It's just super hard to do. And so it's the same thing here. I mean, if you're spending almost 6 hours, 5.5 hours a day, I'll keep the numbers very true. If you're spending 5.5 hours a day consuming media and it's leading you to be unhappy in a lot of different areas of your life, then just stop consuming that much media. Bring it back down to like 2 hours or something, Like, just don't make it so intense. Anyways, that's all I've got to say on this stat. I thought it was super interesting. I hope this conversation is something that maybe sparks some new ideas in your mind. And if it did, once again, please throw comments down below. I love to talk about these things with anybody. As long as you're willing to be respectful and not a jackass, I will message you right back. So, thank you so much for watching this second part of the podcast. Let's get on to the third part of the podcast, which I'm super excited for. Reuben Rants, Section 3. We're talking about the feminized man. Get ready. All right, gentlemen. It is time that we destroy this new sex symbol of masculinity in our culture. What is the new sex symbol of masculinity in our culture? Toothpicks with androgynous faces, no chest hair, perfectly coiffed head hair, and a aversion from hard manual labor, wearing perfect clothes. This is what our culture seems to say to us anyways. This is attractive. This is the new thing that's attractive. And it pisses me off. Here's why it pisses me off. Because you got a bunch of guys out there who see this and they're like, oh, I guess that's what makes a guy attractive. So that's what I'm going to strive for. And it's Hollywood putting this shit out there for you. You're like, oh, this is the new sex symbol. It's like, you're going to be a toothpick and you're going to have perfect hair. And if you don't dress perfectly all the time, well, then you're not really an attractive guy. It's bullshit. It's total bullshit. And I'm calling for us as men to change. I think we need to bring back this idea that what's attractive in a man is this going and doing things. And that means a lot of times doing things that aren't desirable, like from a physical level. Like, okay, getting dirty, getting grimy, using your hands, using tools. that's below me. I couldn't do that. No, you should go do it. You should go do it. It will ground you to the earth in a way that is really hard to explain. It will make you get this intense self-esteem that you wouldn't have otherwise. It'll make you walk out of a job that was really difficult and look back and say, damn, that was really difficult, but I did it. I did it. And yeah, I got dirty and grimy and I got sawdust all over me. And it wasn't, I wouldn't be going to see the president like this. No way. But that was masculinity back in the day, man. We need to bring it back. I'm ready to bring it back. Like, be proud of your chest hair. Be proud of your calluses. We should make that the new sexy, all right? Not this super hyper-manicured, hyper-sanitized male. That's not masculinity. I'm calling for us to get rid of it because I'm sick and tired of seeing it everywhere. It's like there's something that I think brings a lot of joy to men to get dirty and get grimy and to, like, not see dirt and grime as a barrier to going and doing something. Like it used to be back in the day. Your cow would get stuck in your cow pond. And if you were a farmer, guess what you did? You just waded in the mud and the shit with a rope to put around your cow so that the local town people could drag it out of the pond. And there was an acceptance of that man back in the day. There was an acceptance that, okay, that guy's actually badass because he does what has to be done. And he's proud of what he does with his life, There wasn't this weird, like, men have to be women to be attractive. That's not how it should be. It makes everybody in the world unhappier. But specifically, man, I think you should act in accord with your nature. If your nature as a man is to be a doer, to go get things done, and if that means, yes, you're going to go get some shit on you or some mud on you or some grime and dust and sawdust, whatever it is, on you, and you're going to come home at the end of the day and you're going to be like, oh, that was a long day. That's okay. Let's just make that okay. I'm not saying every guy has to do that. I'm not saying your job is lesser if you don't do that. I'm just saying I think that should be the idea of, oh, this is super hot masculinity right here. Is like the person who's kind of grizzled and he's got some years under his belt and he's like a hard worker. That's an attractive aspect of a dude, But instead we're making it all about this weird physical, like, smoothness. Everything's got to be clean and crisp and smooth. And it's like men are supposed to be rugged and tough and a little rough around the edges sometimes. And that's okay. And I just think as a culture, we need to change that narrative and make it so that guys can be guys and still be respected for being guys. That's all I got to say. Hope you enjoyed. All right, folks, that about does it for this episode of the Manuscript Podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you got something out of the video. If you did, please consider subscribing. I hope you guys have a great day. As always, remember, there's a better life out there. Let's get after it.